really, though, I picked up from there was this philosophy that the person I am determines the athlete that I will become. And so that was the thing that really, I think, triggered this spark to utilize training as a channel to learn discipline and persistence and work ethic and these intangibles that go along with doing something hard and volunteering to do it.
You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. Welcome to the Barbell Logic Podcast. This is Matt Reynolds, and I'm here with my good friends Dan Flanick, who is sort of a rising superstar at Barbell Logic as a strength coach, and you are just you're sort of like Jordan Belfort from Wolf of Wall Street without the cocaine and hookers. No,
I was like, Taylor's going to be listening to this.
No. You're a ball of fire, and Gabe Dean, who has just got an incredible wrestling career, and you guys have worked. You've got a podcast that's out now for youth, and then also are working together for the Youth Barbell Club at Barbell Logic. I was just giving Gabe a hard time. Gabe Dean is like the most wrestler name. It's, single syllable, two first names. And also Gabe, just if you see this guy, he looks exactly like what you would picture a really good wrestler to look like. He's short and squatty. He's had his nose broken 3 times. He's got cauliflower ear. Other than that, he has boyishly good looks. So welcome to the show, guys.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, seriously.
Dan, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background in coaching first and sort of what spurned you to do the Youth Barbell Club, and give us a little quick historical background on that.
Yeah, so, I started lifting as a teenager, like I think a lot of strength and conditioning coaches do. And for me, I was always kind of chubby and overweight. My friends had 6-packs, and the girls in the pool would much rather look at them than me. And so I got into training first for really aesthetics. I was super into bodybuilding and that sort of thing. But that really led me down a negative path in my own mind. I was just, I would like train after eating, something bad. It was almost like exercise bulimia. Like I'd run 10 miles after I ate like a bag of cookies or something like that. And so I found barbell training through a mentor of mine who was my roommate, but he had been coaching for about 10 years, and his name is Jim, and Jim took me under his wing and taught me how to lift, how to squat, how to deadlift, press, all that stuff, chin-ups, rows, the good stuff. And so I started focusing a lot more on performance, and it started spilling over into my life in a really different way than it did when I was just focused on the aesthetics portion of it. My personal confidence, what I perceived I was capable of, how I felt about myself, regardless of how shredded my abs looked that day in the mirror, everything started to take shape in a much more positive way. And it was at a time where I had I'd lost my older brother figure. Really, he was my cousin Josh, and he had cancer, and he'd be doing push-ups in the hospital room, nurses yelling at him. He said, I got to keep my body strong. And while I was going through chemotherapy, and that really triggered me to want to actually pursue coaching people, because I saw the benefits in myself, and I saw the benefits in Josh while he was dying. And so I got into coaching, and I thought I was going to be a college strength and conditioning coach. I interned at Cornell University 2012-13 to 14, and while I was going to Ithaca College, that's where I actually met Gabe. He was a freshman when I was interning there, and so we built a relationship then. Then I moved away. I went to Baylor University for graduate school, where I studied pedagogy, which is really philosophy of teaching and coaching. And so I studied coaching, but really while I was there, I spent the overwhelming majority of my time in the weight room with the strength and conditioning staff. And previously to that, they had been voted top strength and conditioning staff in the country. And when I went there, I thought I was going to learn a lot about like the X's and O's, like squats and presses and the programming and that sort of stuff. And I did. And what really though I picked up from there was this philosophy that the person I am determines the athlete that I will become. And those coaches did a wonderful job of holding these young athletes, these young men and women, accountable to doing the right things inside and outside of the weight room too. And so that was the thing that really, I think, triggered this spark to utilize training as a channel, more so than, just training. Like you can you can use karate to learn to fight, or you could use karate to learn discipline and persistence and work ethic and these intangibles that go along with doing something hard and volunteering to do it, to talk about voluntary hardship and that sort of thing. And so that really, from that philosophy, spiraled this development in my own coaching practice, and especially once I opened my gym, and it's been open 3 years coming up this month. And it started off with just coaching like adults, but then all of a sudden I started getting these kids in the door, and that's where the idea of Youth Barbell Club sprung out, because these kids are coming into my gym and opening up to me after we build relationships and trust. And like I had a young man, he's 14, and on the deadlift platform the other day, he just looked off, and I'm like, "Hey man, what's up? You all right? You hurt?" He's, "No, I'm okay." And then his face turns white, and he just starts bawling his eyes out. So I pull him aside. I say, "Let's go in my office." And we have a window in the office. I turn his head so the back of his head's toward the window so nobody could see him. And I go, "What's going on? You can talk to me. What's up?" And he tells me, he's like, "I'm just so anxious. I'm just so anxious. Schoolwork, social life, that sort of stuff." And so I started gathering this pulse on, you could the difference of being a teenager now, even compared to 10 or 15 years ago, where you now can carry high school home in your pocket. The social aspect of it, the pressures, the comparisons during these formative years, and their impacts on self-esteem and their impacts on how these kids perceive, what they're capable of versus everybody else it's much different now because it's with them all the time. And so I realized that Youth Barbell Club was not just about getting these kids their squats strong, but it was really about being in their corner, being a positive mentor, being a role model for them, so I can help them to perceive that they're capable of more than what they currently believe about themselves, which is actually, like, that philosophy really connected Gabe and I too. So there's my little spiel about all this stuff.
Yeah, I like that, Dan. You and I have talked obviously several times about this, that you really have come from this, from the sort of the public sector and the university sector as a strength coach, and you saw the camaraderie and the community building and just this holding the athletes to a higher standard that you get in a university, in that industry, in that community, and I see that you wanted to take that. There isn't anything like that in the private sector. There isn't anything. And so, Gabe, I'd like to ask you as well, because you've come from the athlete side, right? So you've got Dan coming from the coaching side. What was your experience like growing up? I'm sure youth wrestling through high school and into college, in the impact it had on you in positive ways, both as a thing that was just hard and made you stronger physically, but also stronger mentally, emotionally, socially, and then the role that the teams played. The thing about wrestling is interesting because it's an individual sport. I mean, outside of the fact that the individuals are all competing to see what team wins, but I still know that my experience in coaching, in strength coaching wrestlers, is that they might be the tightest teams I've ever coached. It's really interesting. So what is your experience there?
Yeah, so I came from a family of coaches. I grew up, when I was born in East Lansing. My dad was an assistant coach at Michigan State University, and I literally grew up, running around on the wrestling mats with the guys, and those guys were my role models and everything like that. And when I was going into 6th grade, my dad wanted to spend more time with me and actually my brother Max, who's had a really successful career as well. So he took the high school job where his brother was a very successful high school football coach in the state of Michigan. And we grew up playing football and wrestling for state titles all through our high school careers. Well, I'm a little bit more of a unique story because going into my senior year, I actually was going to probably play football in college. I know I'm short and squatty, but I was actually not a bad football player. I was probably a better football player than I was a wrestler when I was coming through my high school career.
Were you a running back or fullback? What were you?
No, now this is really going to blow your mind because I was actually a quarterback, but I probably would have played running back or on defense in college, and that's what I was being scouted for. So I got invited to a combine down in Georgia Tech, and I went down there, and pretty much they did exactly what they got to do in football, which I don't blame them. They pretty much looked me up and down. Once they saw me in person, and were like, "Yeah, you'll never make it at the D1 level." And I was there for about 20 minutes. We drove down in a van with no AC in the middle of July for 13, 14 hours. And then I was there literally for like 20 minutes because they were like, yeah, sorry, you're just not what we're looking for. So I got back in the van and I looked over at my dad, and my dad had always used sports as a foundation for teaching my brother and I and my sister as well. And I said, Dad, I don't want to play football in college. He said, why is that, son? And I was like, well, I want to know whether I fail or succeed. I have control over my outcome, my destiny, I guess. And so I decided to wrestle. And I wasn't a blue chip recruit. I wasn't even nationally ranked in the high school rankings. And my dad knew the head coach at Cornell he's very involved with the wrestling world, and it's a pretty tight community. It's the sport's not like football or basketball where it's huge. It's pretty, everybody knows kind of everybody. And they were down at a coaches convention together, and the head coach at Cornell was like, he's a legendary coach in our sport, and was kind of like, hey, Dave, you have any kids? He's like, yeah, I got 2 boys and a girl. And he's like, oh, what's your boys doing? He's like, well, my oldest son just decided he actually wants to wrestle in college. And he was like, well, would he be interested in coming to Cornell? He's got good grades and everything. And my dad's like, wow, give him a call. And that's exactly what happened. They gave me a call. I came out to campus. I committed on the spot. I loved the area. I loved the community. I loved the family, that culture that they had built. And I got here. And the biggest reason why I love coaching and I got into coaching is for the same reason. They saw opportunity in me. I was an athletic kid, but I knew nothing really on the level about the sport of wrestling. And they taught me so many character traits and values that changed my life and ended up making me having a successful career. And that's probably why I relate to Dan so much, is because he told you the saying at Baylor, the person I am determines the athlete I become. And that's exactly the philosophy that they use at Cornell in the wrestling program. I never even won an open tournament or anything my first year in college when I was taking a gap year, kind of like a redshirt year for the Ivy League. And I came in, and the following year I took 3rd in the country, but it was because everything I learned about myself more than any kind of technique that I was taught, how to work hard, how to get in the right sleeping habits, how to, take that and apply it to the weight room. The weight room had a huge impact on me. I was 170 pounds when I came in. And after that first year, under the guy that Dan actually interned for, I put on about 25 pounds of lean mass, and I was about 195 pounds, and it was just huge for me and impacted me in such a positive way. And throughout my whole career, I continue to learn so much about myself, because that's the way we do things at Cornell. We take that same philosophy, like I said, that Baylor does, that Dan learned. And now I'm on the coaching side, and I got my younger brother coming up through the system, and he's a 2-time All-American national finalist for us last year, at probably one of the biggest upsets in college wrestling history at the national championships last year. And he's got 2 years left. And and he wasn't a blue chip recruit either. And I just see what it does. So many kids like myself have come through this program, and they become better people, which therefore they become better wrestlers. And then they go on and they get great jobs. And, our head coach does a wonderful job of setting them up with internship opportunities and everything. And, so Dan and I have gotten along because of, our values have been built in a similar way, even from different backgrounds. And that's kind of how I came up.
Dan, talk a little bit about, you and I talk all the time about the thing that we feel, or that we believe really kind of sets apart what we do at Barbell Logic. It really comes back to those values. We have a value system that isn't something, I've worked in businesses before where their core values are like the thing they print off on a poster and put it on the wall, and then nobody talks about it, and it really doesn't permeate anything they do. Talk a little bit about those values and how you're trying to bring that into the Youth Barbell Club, and what you're doing with these kids, really in the private sector. And also, you've got guys like Gabe and even Dan, you were able to really take part in this at both Cornell and Baylor, that they had built something special, this community of values, of things that were important. And I think what I've watched you do with the Youth Barbell Club is to reach out to kids who don't have an opportunity to be part of that where they are. They're in these like rural communities, they're in high schools, maybe many of them aren't even athletes. They certainly wouldn't consider themselves athletes in the moment. Maybe they've never played a sport at all, but you're still trying to bring all of those sort of like that value system and that community aspect to the weight room in a way that can meet them where they are when they aren't at Cornell or they aren't at Baylor or they aren't at a powerhouse high school football team or whatever. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing with Youth Barbell Club, and that I think even Gabe and I connected over too, is like sports. I look at training or weight training as a sport, whether it's for health or whether it's as a sport itself or whether it's a sport fueling other sports. And so to me, like I played sports my entire life, and along with my parents, those sports really instilled the values that I carry myself with that give me a sense of confidence and purpose, because I know that as long as I'm staying true to those values, that I'm okay at night. My conscience is clear. I'm doing the things that are meaningful to me. And so the way I do it with kids is I think any relationship founded on very clear and transparent expectations is a base for a really solid and successful and trusting relationship. So, for example, like at my gym and with Youth Barbell Club online, it'll be with their coach via a video chat. Is the first meeting, like for example, today I actually just took a position working with the development program with wrestlers that may go to Cornell or are training for like a world championship or making a world's team or going to other bigger schools and stuff like that. And so today was our first day, and I set these expectations up front. Like I usually say two things. Look, number one is commitment to your training. And being consistent. So if you're consistent in training, then I can help you. That's 50% of what needs to be done. That's your 50%. You be consistent in training. Never miss. Make it a priority. And I'll do the same for you. I drive 40 minutes down here. I told them I'll get up at 4 a.m. and be down here for you to make sure that I'm here. I'm committed to you. You're committed to me, right? So number one is commitment. And the second main thing, just keeping it simple, is do what's right. So do what's right inside and outside of the weight room. If you use that as a filter for every action that you choose, then you're going to be really lined up with what you're trying to do as a person. So doing what's right when it comes to training and using that as the channel is the first thing I start with is a habit right after they're done training. For the kids who I coach in person, we use Snapchat. Send me a picture of your meal after you're done. I don't care what it is, just eat. You have to get in that habit first before I care about food quality. Just get food in. And then the next thing is sleep. Get 8 hours of sleep the night before you train. Get off TikTok or TikTok or whatever, and Instagram and Facebook or YouTube, and read a book and get to bed 8 hours before you have to get up so you can come in energized. And so those are the first things I talk about, is just being committed and then doing what's right. And then from there, like for example, today we use a little warm up. Use the warm up as a way to hold them accountable. You didn't do it fast enough. Do it again, right? So you can use these exercises as a tool, or you can use them as just exercise. But what I think we're doing as coaches, and I think what we're doing at Barbell Logic, is this for all of us isn't just exercise. It's a channel to in which we use training to impact the lives and in ways that transcend just what's physical. And so that's really what I'm trying to do, and being transparent and then embodying that myself is the way that I do that.
Reynolds, you said something that, the reason, you seem like wrestlers are like such a close group of guys. And the reason that is because of the sacrifices and sense of community that's created while we learn the same things that you guys are going to be teaching, the same things that you guys teach at Barbell Logic, and what Dan is going to be creating in the Youth Barbell Club is a sense of community where kids that didn't have, like you said, the same opportunities. Like, honestly, I was extremely lucky to fall into a place like Cornell. That came through a network thing with my dad and the head coach here. Without that, I'd actually have no idea where I'd be. But this gives kids an opportunity to get on it online and be a part of a sense of community that you guys have created and go through the same adversities and sacrifices together, which ultimately is making them better people, and it's holding them accountable and getting them better at training and creating really healthy habits in their lives. And the reason that wrestlers are so close is because we really are training that hard in the room, and you look to your left and your right and you see guys that are going through the same thing, and you sacrifice together, and that's what happens. You become closer. And the reason I was so drawn to this when Dan came to me was it was like I saw these Snapchat groups and all this stuff that was going through Barbell Logic and what he wanted to do with the Youth Barbell Club, and I was like, this is really just more than just like, hey, you get online, you train, and then you get offline. It was like this community that you guys have created, which I just admire so much and relate to so much from my past. So I offered, to make me a co-host on the Youth Barbell Club podcast, and that's exactly why I was so drawn to it, because I was like, anything I do to jump into another community where people are getting better, I just love it.
Yeah. Dan, talk to us just for a second about the difference between the way sort of most of our listeners are going to be familiar with Barbell Logic online coaching and the way we do things. And we have an app that we use. We pair you with a coach. And for our normal clients, we have some sort of test workouts that you do, and to get the programming started, then we provide programming, and then you video yourself on your phone, you upload it on the app, and our coaches break it down within 24 hours. And that's sort of the nuts and bolts. And of course, even for us at Barbell Logic and Barbell Logic Online Coaching, creating the relationship between the coach and the clients are extremely important to us, and a community aspect with things that we like Slack and things that we use there. What's different about Youth Barbell Club than Barbell Logic Online Coaching? We've talked internally about this as what we call kind of a hub and spoke model, and so it's still Barbell Logic Online Coaching, but it's specifically tailored toward a specific demographic, right? And for you, that's this high school athlete. But how do the nuts and bolts look different for the high school kids or the teenagers that are doing this?
Yeah, so the hub being the same as in terms of like the same app, same service, when you uploading videos, video breakdown within 24 hours, coaching and technique and programming and that sort of stuff. And then the next main caveat to the main difference to the service is this accountability piece outside of the weight room, right? So just like sports, it's not like after you're done with practice or after you're done in the weight room, oh, I'm done. No, it's a lifestyle. It really is. And so holding kids accountable to doing the things they need to do outside of the weight room in order to get the most robust benefits from being in the weight room, that's the major difference, or the addition to what we're already doing with the video breakdowns and whatnot. So I work with Jillian, our nutritionist, to put together like the first 90 days of the program is a gradual habit building progression that really uses the same minimum effective dose principles that you've spoken about quite a bit on the podcast and in your lectures and whatnot, where we start off with a few basic habits to where kids can be successful. It's a post-workout meal after they're done training. They report their sleep to us. And gradually, as the program progresses, it gets more and more accountable or rigorous in the sense that there's more stuff that they're going to be reporting to us. And it opens up dialogue, too, with the coach and the client and the young person that they're working with to build a relationship, but also to use as an educational tool, right? We know kids go through times, their lives are changing so much. So whether they stay with us for 3 months or ideally 3 years throughout high school, we want to give them the tools and the foundation to be able to be strong and healthy kids who turn into strong and healthy young adults who turn into strong and healthy parents, grandparents, and lay the foundation for that aspects of life. And so it gets pretty rigorous. And then by the end of the program, we start to taper off because, well, we're not going to be here forever for you. You got to learn to be accountable on your own. And so we'll start to taper off of how much we're doing. And then if a kid's, falling back or needs more help, like it's always individualized per person, but ultimately what we're trying to do is create self-sustaining healthy habits that they can carry with them for the rest of their lives. So that's the other major caveat to the service. And then along with that, instead of using Slack for the community aspect of it, at my gym, all the kids there were telling me, Dan, you need to get on Snapchat. And I told them I don't want to be on that. I'm already on enough social media. But they kept peppering me with, Dan, get on Snapchat. That's where we are. So I said, you know what? Maybe I'll see what I can do with this. Then I started a group, and I started holding them accountable to sending me meals after training. I'm like, well, why don't you just take a picture if they're already on there? Why don't you do this? Because a lot of kids are trying to gain weight, but it just wasn't happening. And so I'm like, well, I'll just send it to me. That way you're accountable to it. And if you don't, I'll put a story up and be like, hey, Marcus didn't submit his meal or something like that. Or what I really like to do is put pictures of kids who submit great meals and say, this is an excellent, and like praise the ones who are doing a great job. So Snapchat turned into this coaching tool, which was fascinating to me because it can impact them because that's where they're already at. When they're not in the gym with me, I can post. It started off with meals, but then I like to meditate in the mornings. I have a lot of deep thoughts, very philosophical, and so I share those things, and I talk about hard work and doing what's right and commitment and the things that I'm trying to embody when I coach them. And so now there's an app where that story stays up 23 other hours of the day, so we can use it for community and also as another piece of the coaching aspect because it's a coaching tool because that's where the kids are interacting already. And so that's the other major difference. So the habit and accountability for that, and then using Snapchat as a coaching tool and community builder.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've never been on Snapchat. I don't really even know how it works. I'm in my 40s, so I think a Snapchat is like, that's where people send you pictures of their titties that you're not supposed to. And I'm like, and I realize that that's not exactly what it is anymore. And that one of my concerns as we went into the Youth Barbell Club was that we had really strict rules about how that's used, and we haven't, and you get booted instantly if there's any sort of inappropriate sort of things. But the kids have really taken to it, and what I like about it is because it's you're meeting them where they are already. Then what happens is the kids start to sort of brag to each other and build confidence. So they're like, check out this PR, and they post a video of their own PRs, or they post the picture of their like ridiculous steak and double baked potato meal or whatever that is. And so I love it because it continues to just raise the standard, and it raises the standard almost organically among the kids, which when that happens, like you've got this incredible snowball effect that when it doesn't have to come from you, but because you've laid the groundwork for this fantastic standard, this is how we do things, then that catches like fire and spreads. And so you see these kids who are maybe a little bit older, they're more like the juniors and seniors, and they've done this a little bit longer, and they've been with you, and they've kind of gone through the beta testing. And we're talking about this Youth Barbell Club is launched worldwide, nationwide this week. As you guys hear this, it's already out. But we've spent months and months and months beta testing this internally, with teenagers and kids of our mostly kids of our current clients, and just to see what works and what didn't. And so it's been crazy. Certainly I'm on board now entirely with the way you've done this, and you've worked out all the kinks, and I love that. I always want to be very careful launching a new thing without any sort of testing in the background. And so we haven't used everything we've tested, but now we've got the honed in pretty tight, and so it's been. And really then cool.
Because that was one of the first things you asked me, just to speak to that Snapchat aspect of it. First, we have a couple kids who don't have Snapchat. Their parents don't want them on social media. They're 13, 14.
Good for those parents, by the way.
Yeah, agreed. Totally fine. Totally, like you don't have to be on Snapchat. And then also, one of the first things you asked me, Reynolds, when I told you about this, you're like, dude, I have at the time she just turned 15 on Sunday, but like I have a 14-year-old daughter, like. I don't know, man. And it's monitored. They're not alone in there. There's coaches in there, and we are very clear. Hey, post whatever you post. You have to be okay if your high school principal sees it.
That's right.
So but we haven't had any issues because of that the transparency and the expectations.
Yeah, that's good. So the last thing I want to turn to, I want to get both your feedbacks on this is. Ultimately, I've thought a lot about this. I started thinking about this when I opened Strong Gym. That the fitness industry, while it should build confidence, I would argue that 99% of the time it actually robs us of confidence. You think about what it's like to go join a gym for the first time for most people. They're going into a gym, they're very something has happened to them emotionally. They've been in a divorce, or their boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with them, or they just this lady just put on this dress that she always looked great in, and now it doesn't fit at all. Or your dad just had a heart attack, or whatever that is. And so you're going in kind of down on yourself typically anyway when you join a gym. And rather than a gym sort of taking you under their wing and building confidence, they do the exact opposite. They expose you to a meat market of just complete and utter bullshit, Yep. And so the thing that was important to me at Strong for an actual brick and mortar gym was that we never had that. That when you walked in, it was like, whoa, like this is home, like you're welcome home, And we've tried to do the same thing. It's super important to us at Barbell Logic. Never was there a more important time for me, however, to build my confidence than when I was a teenager. I was, and I've told this story some, so I don't want to take your time up, but I was a very skinny, low self-esteem, nerdy. I was smart, but very like painfully average athlete, and lifting changed everything in me. And it's not because I think lifting is the most important thing in the whole world. I don't think it's the most important thing in the whole world. I think there's other things like family and faith and other things that have a bigger impact. But the thing I love about the strength training is that it generally changes people's confidence for the better than anything else I've ever been able to put my finger on, right? So you can go do other voluntary hardship like things, like you can go run a marathon, and that's really hard and probably would refine you and probably would make you better, but it's not going to make everybody better, right? And so can you guys both speak a little bit to, probably Gabe first, like what was your confidence like as a kid? And if you were already a naturally confident kid, like it's fine, but how did both wrestling and weight training in that entire life in that community change who you are as a person, and specifically speaking to the confidence part?
So I wasn't a naturally super confident kid at all. I grew up and I was always looking to my left and my right, and like Dan said, it's gotten even worse today with all the social media, but I was constantly comparing myself to my peers. And what wrestling and lifting did for me was really kind of take my guard down and realize that everybody that I was looking to my left and right before, when we got into that weight room, or we got onto the field, or we got into the wrestling room, they were human beings too, with similar insecurities that I had. And weirdly, when you realize that people that you think are just rock stars are just like better than you, or just like crushing life, and they're going through the same things that you are. And when you realize that, it kind of gives you a sense of comfort, like, oh, I'm not the only one that thinks this way and does these things and has these insecurities, like everybody does. And then with those adversities that are set forth and those insecurities within that community, you start to overcome those things together once you start to build trust and you start to build like this family. And then all of a sudden it's like you kind of grow out of it. It definitely helped instill confidence into me as I was, but I had to be, at the same time, I had to be open to, like Dan said, being set, living towards those expectations that were set, living towards those values that were set forth by the people that were running the business, or running the programs that I was in, running the weight room that I was in. And once I was able to gain trust and build that confidence, it became a place where it was like, I don't know why I ever even had these issues before, because I know I come into the weight room now and I get on the field, or I come to the wrestling room now, and I know like those guys became like my brothers, and it just became a place where we all could, whatever happened that day or whatever went wrong in my life that day, you forgot about that for those hour or 2 hours that you were in practice or with those guys, because everybody was going through hard things in their lives too, and there was no reason for you to ever feel sorry for yourself.
That's good.
Yeah,
what you did.
Self-esteem during the teenage years, those are really formative years. And so like I don't know if it's the actual like objective, like you're bending your joints and squatting down and that sort of stuff that's helping with the confidence. I think it's more so that if you have a coach especially, but it's you have something or someone in your corner, whether it's just the activity of lifting if you're doing it alone, or you have a coach in the sport of lifting or in any sport that believes you're capable of something, perhaps before you even realize that for yourself, and then you achieve that, or you surprise yourself because you've been training alone and all of a sudden you're like, holy crap. So it's the process more so than like a squat builds confidence. It's the process of doing something rigorous that you challenge yourself with and that you overcome. And for me, one of this simple moment, baseball was my first life, my first passion. And I was I was about a year younger than most kids in my grade. Like I was in college at 17. My mom let me go to kindergarten at 4. And so the hardest time for me was when everyone was hitting puberty, because 6 months at 13, when everyone else is closer to 14 and I'm 13 and a half or 13 and 3 months, that is a massive amount of time when you're developing and going through puberty. And so for me, I was, one of a better baseball player when we were, 10, 11, 12. Then everyone started hitting puberty, and all the kids in my grade were far more physically superior to me at that point in time. And so my confidence was shot, because here I was, one of the better players in Little League, and then all of a sudden we moved to the big field and I could barely reach second base, and I'm slow and I can't hit the ball very far compared to my friends. And so I remember that year I made a decision. I'm either going to let this affect me in a negative way, or I'm going to tackle this and set a goal. And so I started working at this clinic where I was a catcher, so I would catch for free all the time, and I got free catching lessons in return, because they couldn't find catchers to sit there and catch pitching lessons for 6 hours on Saturday and Sunday. But for me, I saw it as an opportunity to get better, so I would go do that. This one coach, who happened to be the coach of the freshman team, our school was big, about 2,000 kids. They had gotten to the state semifinals about that year when I was in 7th or 8th grade. So by 8th grade, I had spent all this time working really, really hard, and I started to hit puberty, was still a little bit behind, but I had a coach, Coach Treza, and he worked with me, and I got pulled up to the freshman team as an 8th grader. So there I was, like, okay, that hard work paid off. I still wasn't super confident. I didn't get any hits my 8th grade year on the freshman team. And by the end of the season, he just looked me in the eye and said, "You're going to be the starting varsity catcher by the time you're in 10th grade," which was huge, because it's very rare to have a 10th grader as a starter. But there I was a year later as a 9th grader, getting pulled up to the varsity team in playoffs and getting in the game. And by 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I was the starting catcher for all 3 years. And so I think using training for me, I do the same thing with kids. It's got to be a realistic expectation you could set for them, but also something that challenges them. So it's like the zone of proximal development. I think that's an educational tool, right? So it's pushing people hard, but not so hard, and then also not too easily either. So this sweet spot. And so I love doing that with training. I look a kid in the eye and I say, you're going to deadlift 405 by this time next year for reps, and being able to instill this. What do you mean I'm going to be able to do that? Then they actually do it. The process of being told, hey, I believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself, and I'm going to hold you accountable to doing this. Now you've given them a blueprint for achieving things in other aspects of life besides just training too. And so I think it's more the process, having something or someone in your corner, and then pushing yourself to a height or to a level that you perhaps never thought you were capable of. Then you start to rearrange that thermometer, go, I wonder what else I could do. Maybe I can pull 500. Maybe I can go get that scholarship. Maybe I can get that job. Maybe I can, maybe I could date that girl or that boy or whoever, right? So you start to readjust what you perceive you're capable of through the process of achieving those sorts of things, whether it's with a coach or on your own.
As we sort of wrap this up, the last story I want you to share, and take a second if you want to think about this, is that can you tell me, Dan, since you've been testing this for quite some time, can you actually hone in on one of our kids and say, like, let me share with you about this kid. You don't have to use their name, but like, here's a kid who came into the program, and this was kind of their challenges or their hurdles, and here's what we've seen them do, and here's how it's changed their life. So we have an actual story, a testimonial that's come out of that Youth Barbell Club so far, just even in the beta test.
Oh yeah. There's at least a handful that come off the top of my mind right now, but there's one specifically. A young man who he's just turned 17. We started chatting, and we were bringing him in on the beta test, and Andrew Jackson and I were chatting with him about some goals and things like that. And then we got off the phone, and I remember just thinking, I feel like he wasn't saying something. I don't know what it was, but he loves football and he plays football. And so then after another couple of weeks, he ended up signing up for the service. His mom signed him up, and I just flat out asked him, because I was sensing it. I said, dude, do you want to play college football? And he was kind of wishy-washy, and I'm like, it's okay. Do you want to play, but you're not sure if you can do it? And he just let his guard down and said, yeah, I want to. And so that right there, he's 6'2", he's 275. The kid did a 34 or 36-inch box jump. He's banging out chin-ups now. He squats 405 for a double. He deadlifts in the he's got some talent there. Like there's some athleticism there. And so I'm like, look, man, like there's a place for you to play. I don't know where it is. I don't know if it's going to be, Penn State maybe, but either way, like we can start putting in action steps to hit that goal. And why not? What's the worst thing that happens? You end up playing at a D3 school and walking on, but you still get to do the thing you love. Either way, like let's shoot for the stars at the very least. And so since then, like, his numbers weren't what I just described when we first started. Like he's gotten a lot stronger. But the biggest thing that I think, and we're working toward that right now. We actually on one of our first episodes for Youth Barbell Club Radio is the one about getting recruited. And so I made that one, and Gabe and I talk because Gabe's a recruiter now and coach for Cornell. So asked Gabe, from his expertise, what that would look like. And so now we have action steps because of that podcast to be able to start taking them. But the biggest thing that I think hit me was when his mom, we talk pretty frequently, and she said, after that phone call, the one where we talked about, I called him out and said, hey, it sounds like you want to play college football. Like you're just a little nervous. And she said he hung up the phone. He walks around differently. His shoulders pulled back, and he looks at his mom and says, Mom, I'm going to play college football. And she said ever since then, just how he walks around, he never misses training. He's sending me meals all the time. His numbers are going up. She said that on his team, he's telling her that now the kids on his team are looking up to him versus where he was someone that was kind of, maybe in a little bit of a shell before this. And so by me just being somebody in his life who says, look, I think you could do this. Like, from what I'm seeing, like I'm not an expert in football, but your body and what you can do, if we just start setting some goals and you working toward those, something's going to happen. And so now we're in the process of doing that. But his mom telling me about, the shoulders pulled back, the walking around, having this belief in himself. That I think it's a really cool story. And I probably cry like once a week with stuff like that. I'm not crying. You're crying, Reynolds.
That's right. That's what I do. I love it, and I know the kid you're talking about, and he's not like you said. There's a bunch that are similar to this story, to his story, and I just think it's awesome to have somebody that believes in these guys, and so many of them and girls, so many of them come out of this these rural communities where they don't really have that. It's almost like that small town mindset, and they can't get out of it. To have somebody come in and to have guys like you, and to have a guy who's this incredibly successful wrestler, even who's a coach now at Cornell, and goes like, no, listen, like I see these things in you, and they can relate. So I love the way you've brought in these other very successful athletes, and you've had Olympians come and talk to the kids, you've had professional athletes come and talk to the kids, and their story is often really similar, that they come from this this rural town, and I remember you had one not long ago, there's a guy that was an Olympian rower, and it's amazing because I just came from this town, and there was and they have a very similar story of just like hard work and perseverance, and then people along the way that believed in them and gave them the encouragement they needed to succeed, and they did. And so again, I think for us, the most important thing for these kids is not that they go to a Division I school and go play sports. For a lot of these guys, it's just the way it changes their lives, the way it refines them through voluntary hardship, in the same way that it refines us through voluntary hardship. It's just that they're young enough that it's almost like there's the need to take them under your wing a little bit more and give them that encouragement. And so whereas a 38-year-old guy, a lot of times he can kind of figure some of this stuff out and can kind of see the forest through the trees. I love what you've done to be able to support these kids, regardless of whether they go become Division I athletes or not. It's just the way that it's affected them positively from a confidence standpoint, from a mental and social standpoint, and then of course physically, and which I think is a big part of it. I have a similar story to you, where I was the same age as everybody else in my school, but I hit puberty a year and a half later than everybody else. And so
you hit it? I didn't even know you hit it yet.
Yeah. And so finally, and if it weren't for lifting, then I would have never, that was the thing, and so I needed that. All right, so as we wrap this up, I want you guys to talk a little bit about the Youth Barbell Club podcast. You guys are co-hosting that together. What does that look like? What are those podcasts about? Who's the intended audience? Just fill us in a little bit.
Yeah, so we're calling it Youth Barbell Club Radio. It'll be on iTunes as this podcast comes out. It'll be there. And the intended audience really is It's a mix. It's going to be parents. Like Gabe brings this whole aspect of being a college coach. So kids who are into sports and need to understand different aspects and topics of really getting recruited and doing the things they need to do to make it to that next level if that's their goal. And also the non-athlete I think all kids, everyone who we're coaching is an athlete, like if they're in the weight room, but the kids who don't necessarily play organized sports or more into other aspects but want to use training for health and an activity they can do all the things we just talked about with the confidence and that sort of stuff. So we're covering topics more so on that. So like, for example, one of the first episodes is the one about getting recruited. Another one is the one about social media. And Gabe talks about during that episode about like, how it impacts recruiting. Then we also talk about like what I see with kids that I've coached and how it can impact their mental health and stuff like that. So it's really more for parents and kids to listen to, but I just don't think, young teenagers are on podcasts a ton. So this is more geared toward parents who really want to help their kid, whether it's with using training as a channel for other reasons or using training as a channel for to get them to become better athletes.
And then like during my time, I get hired in to come to do clinics and speak and that kind of thing inside the wrestling world and a couple different sports outside the wrestling world I've spoken to. And usually the questions that come up when I take questions and the clinics wrap up is like, always from parents, like, how do I get my kid to become self-motivated, or how do I get my kid to, to overcome like, the fear of losing, or how do I get my kid to, this or that. So at the same time, actually, we brought my parents on the podcast
Nice.
for one of our episodes, and they talked about raising my brother and I and all the different things that come up, with kids and sports and overcoming those adversities. And from a parent's perspective, and I brought my mom and my dad on there so they could talk, because it's very two different perspectives that they shared from their seats. So it's really to help answer those questions for those parents as well as help their kids, grow up through sports and through adversities that come about.
Awesome. So you guys can go check that out if you want more information on just wanting to learn anything. One of the things I know that is important to us is that we try to put out high quality content for free. And so you don't have to be a member of Barbell Logic Online Coaching, or your kid doesn't have to be part of Youth Barbell Club to listen to these podcasts and get a lot of value out of these podcasts. We know, and it's a big part of who we are as a business, is that when we provide value to people for free from a content perspective, that we know that people over time they'll join our family, either themselves in the Barbell Logic Online Coaching or their kiddos for Youth Barbell Club, or both. And so it's an honor to be able to do those things for you guys. And so, guys, thanks for what you're doing. I love the fire that you guys have to help kids, and I love that you're able to come from these different perspectives of both coaches and athletes, and just bring sort of every sort of direction to be able to create value to these both the kids and the parents. And I love the fire that you guys have behind this. That's what I love about being able to have this kind of hub and spoke model at Barbell Logic, is that we get to have these coaches who are super passionate about a thing, and they get to go run with it. And so if the parents want to talk to their kids and sign them up for Youth Barbell Club, what's the best way to do that?
Go to youthbarbellclub.com. It's all hooked up. It'll bring you to a website or a landing page that's dedicated to Youth Barbell Club, and there's links there. You can schedule a call with one of our coaches, or just sign up right from the page. Our first class, so we're starting to take signups. Actually, last Friday when this podcast came out, it was Friday the 13th was when we launched it publicly via social media. The first group that's going to go through, and we want them all to be starting at the same time, really mainly for this community aspect of it, so they're going through it together, is April 13th. So after Easter Sunday, spring breaks are either starting or finishing. It's a good time to get started. So the first group, when you sign up, their training and their coaching won't actually start until April 13th, but they'll have a call with their coach in the meantime and kind of get their expectations set and get excited to get going on April 13th.
Awesome. So again, you can go to youthbarbellclub.com. You can also go to just the Barbell Logic website and go to online coaching. The links will be there as well, so we'll make it easy to find. And get your kiddos signed up, man. Change their life. They will love it. Just like anything else, it's always a little bit scary in the beginning, and then they'll find their niche, and they'll just let them spread their wings and fly. It's been really, really crazy. And I think that's all three of us have those same stories for us as teenagers, and so being able to facilitate that for your kids is important to us for sure.
Yep,
awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for being on the show, and we'll talk to you soon, I'm sure.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
You guys have been listening to the Barbell Logic podcast. If you love what we do, we'd love a 5-star review. Go to iTunes or any of your favorite podcast hosts and give us a 5-star review. Say something nice about us. And if you have any questions about the Youth Barbell Club, you can reach Dan as well. Go to youthbarbellclub.com, set up a call, talk to one of our coaches or talk to Dan, or you can always email. The experience email we'll do as well. So you can go to experience@barbell-logic.com, and in the subject line, if you put Youth Barbell Club, you can ask Dan any question that you want, and Dan will answer that question and or set up a call with you and answer questions face-to-face over a conference call or a phone call as well. And so we'll just want to do what we can to help facilitate that for you and your kiddos. And so get them signed up. It'll change your life for the better.
And Nikki Berman will be taking a lot of the calls as well. So
awesome. She does
both of us. Yep.
She does a great job. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you in a couple days.
Treston be arrestin'.